Two of the most buzzed about, speculated upon, and long-awaited Android phones are finally here, the Nexus 5 from Google and LG, and the Moto X from Google-owned Motorola. Despite being step-siblings of a sort, there are plenty of differences between these phones. Look and feel. The unique shape and curved back panel of the Moto X make it the most pleasurable phone to hold in the hand that I've ever experienced. Ironic, given that one of its other top features is touchless control. It's a little smaller than the 4.95-inch Nexus 5 screen, which is at the center of a bulkier body. Instead, the Moto X sports a 4.7-inch screen that feels substantially smaller. While the Moto X has the most handsome backside, perhaps in the entire history of smartphones, the side of the Nexus 5 that you'll actually spend the most time looking at is in a completely different class. The 1280x720 AMOLED display on the Moto X is just fine, but the Nexus 5 boasts a 1920x1080 HD IPS display jamming 445 pixels into each inch that's a real pleasure to tap, swipe or just stare at for a bit. Even with the Nexus 5's display edge though, the Moto X simply has a superior industrial design and size that looks and feels better in the hand or pocket. As I've mentioned, the display on the Nexus 5 really outdoes the Moto X, and a big part of this has to do with the superior guts behind that sheet of glass. At the center of the Nexus 5 is the top-flight Snapdragon 800 quad-core 2.26 GHz CPU married to an Adreno 330 450 MHz GPU that essentially banishes all lag and creates a super snappy and responsive touch experience. Motorola's X8 system in the Moto X, which is based around a dual-core Snapdragon S4 1.7 GHz CPU and Adreno 320 GPU, is certainly no slouch either, but it is a notch down from the Snapdragon 800. Possibly extending the Nexus 5 advantage here is Android 4.4 KitKat, which is optimized to run on devices in emerging markets and elsewhere that might have less brawny components. Android KitKat and other sweet software. For most Android enthusiasts, you might assume this one is a gimme for the Nexus 5, which has the advantage of getting the most up-to-date version of the mobile OS and being free of the normal bloatware imposed by carriers and OEMs. Ease of use. Perhaps the biggest surprise to me in the Nexus 5 is its lack of the touchless control feature introduced in the Moto X. Motorola had to custom design a chipset to make the feature possible without sacrificing too much battery efficiency. The Nexus 5 Snapdragon 800 comes with similar voice control ability built in, but Google opted not to fully utilize it. Camera. It's difficult to get excited about the camera on either device. Both phones are designed to offer a top-notch experience, but do it while undercutting the price of super-hyped competitors like the Galaxy S4 and iPhone 5s. It seems like one of the corners that may have been cut to make this happen in both cases was with the camera. Neither shooter is particularly bad, they're both just middling. If I have to choose, I'd consider that the Nexus 5 has an HDR mode that takes much better shots than were possible on the Nexus 4, but that's not saying much. The verdict. Overall advantage, Moto X. If we give equal weight to all 7 of the above categories, the Moto X comes out on top, 4-3. However, most people will tend to give a little more weight to the final score on price and compatibility. For an unlocked phone, the Nexus 5 is a deal that's tough to pass up, so long as Verizon isn't the only quality network in your area and inter-hemisphere travel isn't your main motivator. If price and network compatibility aren't as much of a concern, I think most average users will build a stronger relationship with the Moto X, while power users might be drawn to the brawn of the Nexus 5.